Huzzah! There we go. Good. We're on and going and cooking on gas and all those sorts of good things. So, live from the new chair, which means no more squeaky, which is great. So I can move around and you don't get the sound in the background, which makes you think something else is going on. Got myself an Underseat Phantom 3, which is just, I guess, a posh way of saying now my bum is really comfortable and my lower back has some actual support, which is nice. Also, increased chance of falling asleep in the chair because I'm not going to fall over the back of it. So, yeah, if that happens, apologies in advance, but I'm sure it won't. Good morning, Shinobi. Morning? Where on earth are you for it to be morning, my friend? Clearly not US, because I think I'm streaming late enough for it to be afternoon in pretty much all of it, I guess. But yeah. Edison's here and being just as useless as always. Great, thanks, Edison. Stream today, we are going to have a look at a whole bunch of things. I want to look at a little bit more Star Citizen. We've had some news this week. I haven't seen ISC yet, other than the first kind of 2 minutes, because I started watching it and thought this would be really good to do on stream. So I've saved that for stream. 6 a.m. in Oz. Good Lord. That is an early morning. And it'll be Monday for you, right? Because you're ahead of us. Stunner, welcome, mate. Yeah, so good stuff. Yeah, we're going to have a look hey, hello, afternoon on East Coast, US. Yeah. Yes, quite. I'm not saying that out loud on stream because I'll get in trouble. Despite the the little nerve squeak you heard in the background, which is quite good fun. There are a couple of completely random files wedged into all of the playlists that I have for absolutely no reason. For example, so yeah, just completely random stuff. Fearfox, good evening, welcome, thanks for joining us. Good evening for us, good day for wherever you are. Yeah, going to have a look at some of the Star Citizen news, going to have a look at ISC, then we're going to have a look at a little bit more Starfield stuff. There's a few more bits kicking around there that I want to have a look at, and then have a look at a new space RPG that has been has had another trailer put out, but I've not, or space RTS even, that has had some trailers put out that I haven't seen before, so that should be quite good fun to react to. Aidan McKee, good evening, bud. Did you get CitizenCon tickets? I did not, sir. Unfortunately, the cost of going from here to LA, I looked at it at the beginning of the year. I just thought it's a little bit just over what I needed, and thankfully there's been a whole bunch of other stuff that's happened in the meantime that have shown me that I made the right decision. So not going to CitizenCon this year. Absolutely looking to go next year, whether it's in Frankfurt or the UK. I'm happy to go to either. Obviously, if it's in Canada, we'll have to see. But no, I didn't. Did you? Has anyone in here got tickets for CitizenCon? Because it's a long old wait now, and if that's a reference to the title that I've put down, then if you're new to the Star Citizen community, you may not know that these couple of months leading up sometimes can be a little bit sparse on the information that we get. Sometimes you don't get a lot of revealed by them, because of course they're keeping all their big reveals for CitizenCon, as well they should, but it can leave us in a little bit of an information drought. So you got other stuff for that time. It's just unfortunate, but that's the way it falls sometimes. So yeah, sometimes there's a lot to a lot leaves much to be desired that we get from CIG in this gap, because they're keeping all the big reveals. But as we said, ISC, a little bit of reveal on the munching on Savage. So hopefully there'll be something cool in that, and we'll have a look at that and a react to that in just a little while. As always, at the beginning of the stream, we are not sponsored. This time it's a little bit of a surprise from left of field. Okay, Heritage, it's the English Heritage Foundation. They do a lot of work preserving our kind of monuments and our history, castles, country houses, that sort of stuff. And as part of that, they own a winery, or they're in a deal with a winery that does mead. So mead is a honey-based alcoholic beverage. And the last time I drank mead, I got through it incredibly quickly, and was very, very drunk. So, if nothing else, drunk badges on stream. After about my second glass, I think all bets are off, and I can't be held liable for anything that I say. Yeah, we'll see. Good stuff. So, one of the first things I want to do is have a look at the roadmap roundup. A little bit of news there. Just coming in around and about what's going on now. This came out last week. So, this is all the stuff that's been added to the progress tracker. So, there are no dates for this to be finished. All we have is when the existing work finishes on the roadmap tracker. But we've got steel evidence, cargo hauling, steal and recover cargo, restoration contracts, which is going and patching up ships rather than ripping all the hull material off, replacing missing or faulty components, and replacing weapon loadouts in new salvage yard locations. So cool. Salvage yard locations. And the word new, it means it's not like the Devlin scrap and salvage locations we have already. These are going to be, whether they're in space or whether they're on the planet, we don't know yet, but that's kind of cool. Yeah. And then a little bit of reputation, hostility. So this is the system that means that people you're friendly with aren't going to attack you. The factions that you're hostile with are going to attack you. So that's kind of cool as well. And then sandbox triggers for the reputation system. This feature will allow for players to have their reputation increase or decrease with organizations based on their actions in the persistent universe, separate from missions. This in turn will either allow or prevent players from accepting missions for particular organizations. So, in other words, if you find a Ninetales ship zipping about and you attack it, but you're not on a mission, that will still affect your reputation with them. And, lawful rep up a little bit, everything else down a little bit. And then for release view, physicalized cargo to come alongside the Mistral C, automated cargo loading at Leo stations, as well as SCU containers up to 32 SCU. So those big long boxes that we've seen on the back of the raft that are going to go onto the Hull series as well, they're in. And then the Crusader A1 Spirit. So the bomber. Which is, shame we couldn't get the C1 at the same time. I'm not sure what the delay is, because it's like the C1's gameplay loop is in as well, I guess, but figure out. And then new Crusader platforms, new missions, and retrieve consignment. So those platforms that we saw during things like the Siege of Orison, they're being spread out all over the planet as far as I'm aware, and then those platforms we can go down and fly down to them normally, conduct missions as you would do any other location. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, a little bit more on the gameplay front in the PU for 320, which is, encouraging. Avi says, I think it has to be waiting on the tractor beams. Oh, you mean the ship mounted ones, Avi? Yeah, that's a good point. That may well be it. Because at the moment, they're going to automated cargo loading, so I don't know. I doubt we'll see that. I would imagine what that will be is it'll just be a timer, and then your ship will suddenly have the cargo in it, I would imagine. It'd be cool if it was the other one. But, if we had something where you could actually see people go up the ramps with, cargo handling devices and stuff like that, and actually stack the cargo in your hold. But I don't think we're quite there yet. Baby steps. Cool. Still working on the one-screen setup, as you can tell from the little sneak peeks behind the curtain. But what I want to do now is I think it would be really cool if we just have a look at some of inside Star Citizen that they did from last Thursday regarding cargo hauling and salvage. So let's go in just a moment and have a look at that.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Inside Star Citizen, our weekly look at the behind-the-scenes development of what my mother calls that video game Jared's making whenever she explains it to her friends. It's Q3, and if you've been following this show in any of its incarnations for a while now, you know that the road to CitizenCon is a very interesting one for our weekly video content, as we skillfully avoid all the hot topics being saved for the big, now 2-day event, and use that challenge as an opportunity to explore aspects of our development that might otherwise never get a chance to shine. It's an opportunity this quarter to look at how Rastar is being used to remaster existing UGFs in Alpha 320, to explore racing a little bit, and a new ship that readers of Jump Point magazine and our social media channels probably already know is on its way. An update to Claudius and how it's being used to create even more immersive environments heading your way, and then a spin around the whole VFX department to see what they're up to. Yes, Virginia, it's true, there will be fire. We can do all this and more as we navigate our journey to the big 2 days in October. But up this week, and my reason for sitting here at my desk, dumping just a little bit of SCL into our ISC, is to talk to Torsten and Jacob from the EUPU feature team about the prototyping process, how they test design and programming implementations at the earliest stages, and how it relates to munching, an important component of salvage, and my nightly routine just 20 minutes before I go to sleep.
Go, Jared.
Torsten, Jacob, how you doing, people?
Doing good.
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, so we are here talking about prototyping process. Before we get into
Hey,
it,
Eminence, good
give
to
me
see you,
the
buddy.
top level, just the like the LinkedIn version answer. What is a prototype and why do we do it?
A prototype basically can have several facets in game development, and for us particular, it is always about gameplay, and in this particular case, it is about the technical, the technical problems that we might face and we might have to solve. So for that, we always use prototypes, and playtesting those prototypes is a crucial part in game development, where it is mainly used to prove theories, where the theory is either gameplay is fun, does it technically work, and this is basically what the purpose of a prototype is.
Anything you want to add, Jacob?
From more of a dev
Let me know if the
perspective,
volume levels are...
We tend to take what
Let
the
me know.
designer's vision is for gameplay, and then we've got to figure out how can we achieve that in the game, and just often...
Is anyone else very intently watching the dude in the background and what he's playing? Because it's like, I need to know what you're doing. Is that something we haven't seen before, or is that something we have seen before?
That's not crystal clear from the start, so we have to try a few things and see what technical hurdles might be ahead of us that we're going to have to consider for the full development.
So
what we're gonna
refineries, I
do
think.
on this week's show, the first of our Q3 shows where things are a little bit different, we are going to look at a feature at the absolutely earliest stage. This
Thanks,
is
Ed.
earlier than we've ever shown any feature ever, the prototype phase. What we're about to show you is not going to look good. It's not going to look pretty. It's going to be weird, poppy, and buggy. So we're just warning you ahead before you take the footage and put it in your YouTube videos. What is the prototype that we're going to look at right now, Jacob?
We're going to be looking at the prototype for munching, the next tier of salvage. The idea being we need some way to take apart a larger ship and break it into little pieces so that you can then pick it up in your salvage ships, gain some material from that, and you'll be able to sell that later. But we're going to be looking at just the breaking a ship apart phase, which is what we're prototyping here.
All right, so I got it queued up here. Let's take a look at this here. So obviously this is a vulture approaching a gladius.
Yep. So for the prototype, we've added in a new munching mode, sub-mode to salvage. So all of that hull scraping UI has disappeared, and we're going down to just what we need for this prototype, which is the ability to break apart a ship, which at the moment is going to look exactly the same as if you blew it up with your guns, but in future that would look rather different.
What's happening right here? I see the bar filling up on the left,
Okay,
but nothing's
so-
happening with the ship.
Yeah, so this is the placeholder for the actual gameplay that would happen here. The design will have some actual gameplay for what you have to do as a player to break the ship apart, but we put in that little placeholder, which is just essentially a timer, a progress bar, based on how big the target is.
And that is actually on purpose, because the question that we are asking in this prototype are more technical. That means that we shouldn't focus on the gameplay aspect, so we should keep the gameplay as minimal or as simple as possible, and then so that we can fully focus on the technical bits of the prototype.
Okay, so we saw it broken into some, what looked like normal debris, but now we got to break it into smaller, munchable stuff. So we'll go back to the video here.
So breaking it into normal debris is stuff that you've seen before, but when we have this bigger part, it doesn't come apart into more pieces naturally. So in this prototype, we are just deleting the thing and replacing it with loads of tiny little placeholder pieces to act as the munched apart debris. What you're also seeing is a prototype for how you will get those pieces into your cargo, which is a little suction field that grabs those little pieces, drags them towards the grinder in the mouth of the vulture, and from there they're converted into cargo.
Those little pieces that we saw are obviously not arted and everything. I want to remind people again, we've literally never shown anything in a prototype phase before, so forgive me for reiterating this 2 or 3 more times before we're done here. This is designer art, just small pieces to represent the mass and the size of stuff that we might be using.
It's even worse, it's coda art.
Yes, indeed. This is the programmer equivalent of a white box test, where I'm not even qualified to make white boxes, so I just rip off other assets that I found in the engine and just slap them together. So that's what this is.
And obviously, without being a prototype, there's no VFX, there's no explosions, there's no beams, there's none of the things that would mask this transition that would normally happen, so that you don't see the pieces just pop in, like they're currently doing.
Yes.
All right, so that was done on your local machine, just you on your workstation doing a local version of the universe here. The next phase, as I
Just the Reclaimer doing it,
is to test it in PU conditions, and we're going to go ahead and start this video because this video is going to go for a little bit. Tell me what we're doing here.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what we're doing, and then we can discuss later why we're doing that.
Exactly.
What we're doing right here is I want to test worst case performance conditions. So I'm chucking in some console commands to load up or stream in several different landing zones at the same time. Because otherwise, me as just one player on the server, I wouldn't really be loading that much. I wouldn't be stressing the server. So I'm going to stress it quite a lot by loading up as many landing zones as I can think of off the top of my head, basically, until I see that server FPS count go appreciably lower. And then only once I've done that am I going to step into the actual gameplay test.
I also noticed you've upgraded from a Gladius to an 890 jump.
Yes, because when I think worst case for breaking a big thing into small things, I want the biggest possible thing, which is going to require lots and lots of small things. So, yeah, 890 jump is a good candidate for that.
Okay. So, what are you typing here? Oh, yeah.
I'm just typing in some comments for the other recipients of this video, because this was an internal video for, reviewing stuff.
Do you often use console commands to leave notes for people?
There are other ways, but it's the most convenient. So,
all right. So we've got the server simulating PU conditions. All the landing zones are loaded at once instead of streaming
Yes.
in and out like they would normally would. So
Yes,
it's actually
and-
worse than you would see on a normal PU.
Indeed, and we're going to see that immediately, that this breaking the ship apart that we saw work so nicely in the editor, well, I've really annoyed the server here because all of these pieces are, popping in a not so great way. And I make a bit of a sarcastic comment about it in the console.
It's important to create these conditions, to test these things, not just in ideal conditions, not just the ideal universe of your own computer, or even the PU when it's like first loads and nobody's in and everything's
Crime
great.
starting
No,
testing,
indeed.
yeah,
What
absolutely.
I'm testing here is worse than we would hope it ever to be. We don't.
Maybe
want
this is the
it
closest
to
you can
ever
get
be
to
this
being a bad boy.
but we got to test
Don't
it
you?
because it might be.
All right, so here's where
Now,
beams
we're
would be
going to-
shooting out, starting to break the ship apart.
Yeah, there'd be extra gameplay here, there'd be VFX or whatever, but in the editor version, we saw pretty much as soon as the big piece disappeared, all those tiny little bits turned up. Well, it's not going to go that way in this situation. We're going to be waiting quite some time for all those little pieces to turn up.
Gotcha. And so while we're waiting for those pieces to turn up here, let's talk about what we learned from what we've learned from these tests so far. Obviously, there's some performance stuff, but there's also some gameplay implications from what we've seen. Torsten, you want to talk us through it?
Well, I can talk about some parts that we learned from, right?
Sure.
So the best thing that you can learn from a prototype is actually everything that goes bad, because this is the stuff that you can then iterate on and make the gameplay or the technical stuff even better. So from the gameplay perspective, so I will just talk about the gameplay stuff, and Jacob can talk about what we learned from a technical perspective there. Is from the gameplay we learned that what about big ships? So how, for example, now you saw the Vulture trying to attach to the 890 jump. That is a bit of a wonky situation and it doesn't feel right. So what about Vultures actually munching bigger ships? So how can we make that an interesting gameplay? Then you saw in the first video what happens when the ship transitions into the smaller bits. So the masking is a huge topic that we have to solve so that it feels right and you don't notice that one element pops away and another element pops in. So we definitely have to mask that. Then what you might have seen in the first part is the conversion of materials. I don't know if you paid attention to the filler station bar that basically fills the SU crates in the backside of the Vulture, but that filled drastically faster than it would normally do with hull scraping.
Yeah,
that
look at
means
that.
that
Full. Done.
it would be more painful for you to munch because you have to stand up from your seat more often, go down to the filler station, remove the boxes. So this is definitely an issue that we then have to solve because we really don't want to have this gameplay to be more tedious than it's has to be. So we have to find a solution how we can make it more like much nicer for the player.
And
to
also
actually
crane.
remove those crates there.
For me, I was thinking about this as they were talking. That's a really nice shot to freeze it on as well. Look at that. But a couple of vultures and a Gemini, was that? I was thinking about this as they were talking, and some sort of crane just on the roof, some sort of like, that just picks it up from where it is and puts it into the bay, and you can choose which bays to put it on, but maybe it's another screen that you can just go to that one, go to that one, go to that one, and just get it to fill the bays up. Because that is a bit of a pain that you've got to go down there all the time, especially on a vessel that's designed to be operated by a single person and only has beds for a single person. I understand why you would need to do it on the reclaimer because it's bigger, more crew. But even then, just why can't you have a little crane that just deposits it in the cargo areas? Or deposits it on the pallet, and then the player moves the pallet down to the next level and then puts it into the cargo area. I don't see why that wouldn't be a thing.
Then the navigation around the pieces is also something that we notice isn't that fun. So we will probably utilize the tractor beams there because we are anyway working on them, but maybe that makes it much easier for players instead of flying around and getting the pieces between the fork of the vulture and then having it disintegrate, but instead you pulling the pieces in with a tractor beam. The fork of the vulture is very limiting in terms of what pieces will fit, so this is also something we learned.
though.
And a big thing is which already is standing out is how can we make it fun and unique for the reclaimer. So we just were looking in the prototype at the vulture, and the big question that our team was asking in the end of that prototype was
like that.
Okay, how can we facilitate the claw and the uniqueness visuals, or the uniqueness in general of the reclaimer, to actually facilitate that gameplay and have it stand out and be meaningful and fun.
All right, so a lot of gameplay, gameplay implications from just that little prototype. Jacob, what was your takeaways?
From the tech perspective, I'm looking at things like the performance and also just what am I going to have to account for to achieve the designer's vision?
So, yeah, possibly, AV. AV says, the Vulture, I kind of feel like they wanted the inconvenience, despite what they say, to make you upgrade to the bigger, better ships. Yeah, I can see how that would work. But interestingly, just in the background, I want to know what this stuff is, whether it's debug stuff on his console, or whether we're getting some look at a new HUD. But I don't know what this stuff is here.
Here. And I know that we're going to want things like the time that it takes to destroy something to be somewhat proportional for its size and mass. But from the initial prototype, I could already see that a bigger piece taking longer. It already takes a few seconds with the Gladius. If we're going to scale that up and scale up the time as well proportionally to a big target, we're going to have to think about what equation are we going to use for scaling that, so that it doesn't take you ages, like sitting there for minutes to break something apart. I got to think about how I'm going to hook in the visual effects and the audio. What dependencies am I going to need to get involved?
Speaking of judging time, the entity system is taking a little bit of time to spawn all the spawn debris. We've been talking. This is still going at the moment. Obviously, there's going to have to be some optimization work there with the entity system.
This is kind of what we've got with PES is that it's not quite as quick to create entities as before we had PES. And we have all sorts of great stuff that comes with PES, so this is just a small limitation that we have to learn to work around. But it tells us that gameplay ideas that we had before PES might need some adaptation in order to work efficiently in the post-PES world.
So speaking of which, let's go back to the video. I think we're about to get the entity spawns now. Any second, this
they should be
in the
here.
background while we've
Should
been
be here
talking.
any moment now. Yes.
There we go.
There we go. And a bit of a flicker as they come in, but they're finally here. So yeah, this tells us, well, in this worst case scenario, this performance is obviously unacceptable. We're going to have to do something about this. So we're thinking about how can we change our approach? How can we optimize what we've got? Discussions in various different directions. But this is a key takeaway from this prototype, because if it had gone differently, if we tried this and the pieces turned up in just a few seconds or so, then we'd have known that this approach on the whole was probably acceptable, and with a little bit of optimization, it'd work. But that's not what happened. The stuff took minutes to arrive, and that means we have to do some more serious rethinking about how we're going to approach this.
The vision and the basically the acceptance criteria our directors define, they are still untouched, right? So those are still to be fulfilled, and even the overall vision that we as the team defined for how that gameplay should play out, those will be like, those are already set in stone because we all agreed on those. But how the actual gameplay then plays and feels, this is still affected by the prototype. A prototype like this is really perfect for stepping in early and making sure that every tick box on our acceptance criteria is met, and we can make a better game.
Turns out the new chair does make noise.
I think we all have a real desire and responsibility towards testing these things as often and as early and under as much duress as possible as we work to stabilize the PU and make it a more enjoyable experience going forward. So, Torsten, Jacob, thank you for hanging out with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, works for me. And I realise I've cut him off there just at the end, Jared, but, so be it. Sorry, Jared. But yeah, I'm always a fan of those sneak peeks that we get kind of behind the scenes, because you don't get them in a lot of other places, especially not something like that that's very rough. They're very honest about the time that it took to spawn stuff in, that it doesn't work, that PES is having an effect, right? With a lot of games companies, you just don't hear that stuff, because why would you admit to stuff working maybe not as you would hoped it would have within the game? So it's nice to see that they're being a little bit honest about that and giving us that peek behind the curtain. And even if it's not your thing, even if that's not, couldn't care less about that particular thing, it's still cool. And I think, I like to try and say that I'm pleased or happy with that when they do it. Just because, it's I think it's good to say to people, or just to say to the company, like, all right, that might not be what I'm interested in, but thanks for showing us behind the scenes stuff, because you don't always get access to this sort of thing. So yeah, not a bad little episode at all. It's interesting because I didn't think, I thought vultures were going to have an upper size, and I'm not sure what you guys think in chat, but I always thought vultures would have an upper level as to precisely what they were going to be able to munch. And I never expected a vulture to ever go anywhere near like an 890 jump and expect to break it up. Maybe sections of it, maybe if there are pieces left behind, but it doesn't make sense to me unless you go down the route of those two extendable bits that do the hole scraping, is also give them the ability to cut, and then you cut sections off the ship. You go and get hold of something that then is manageable for the vulture, or make the vulture's wings openable so they can extend slightly outward, not in flight but in munch mode. But yeah, it's interesting. Edison says, to me, salvage is boring as can be, but I still want to get more deeper, and to be more fun for those who like it. Yeah, because this is hopefully the key bit around the game, right? Is that you make cargo gameplay really interesting for those that want to do cargo, make exploration really interesting for those who want to do that, make salvage and mining really interesting. Keep doing that. You attract all players, and it's a true interaction of people who don't want to get pirated and who might hire escorts or whatever. But Davey says, it's good to know that they're working on it, and figured as much is more limited. Who knows when they decide to chunk it, or if they just use explosives or what. That's the other thing, right? That's a beautiful example, actually, Avi. That's a really good point. We've got these devices that go in mining and do like the wave stabilization stuff. Why not do blasting charges effectively for that size of vessel? That works really, really well. Yeah, absolutely. Stunner says, I'd like the vulture to have a cutting laser. Lol, you just said it, but still can only cut overall smaller large pieces than a reclaimer can. Yeah, for me, that's the point in the big size vessels, right? Is the bit that still doesn't make sense to me is that claw that comes out. How does that get that material into the shredder? That doesn't make sense to me yet, unless it kind of pushes it up. But yeah, wasn't the Vulture the one with explosive charges? Avi says, sorry, we've literally just gone there, haven't we? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember that, but that's not to say that that's not the case. It's just that I wasn't following the Vulture very closely until it got very close to its release. And then all of a sudden it kind of became more important or more vital in my eyes. Eminence in Shadows says, yeah, a few Vultures should be able to fully salvage an 890 jump, the same way a few Prospectors can team up to match a model's capabilities. Yeah, if they went for more detailed damage models, they could have it where you don't break apart the whole thing all at once. You break it down in sections and you kind of like munch into it in exactly the way, like, you see the time lapses of the ships being broken down for scrap in the real world. And, you know, they work at them and they work on a new section and then that finishes and they work on something else. And you see this thing, it's almost like watching, you know, something really big getting eaten by ants. You just see sections of it disappear and all this little frantic activity. AV says, thought they swapped the cutting laser for the reclaimer because of the size of the ship getting out to place charges is a no-go. But the Vulture has the door there for the cockpit. Yeah, I mean, even if you add the ability to place them manually, but certainly like getting out and you know, placing those charges in advance and then having them detonate and then going from there, because you could do some sort of like advanced scanning where you find like the best place to place the charges, and then if you don't place it close enough, then the ship doesn't break up in as many pieces. You've got to go back out again. There's all sorts of ways they can make that really, really interesting. Shinobi says, I find mining boring, but I've started to get into salvage. It's a good way to make fake space money and not risk getting in-capped doing bunkers solo. Yeah, absolutely. I quite enjoy salvage. I just really, really hope I can overcome this bug that I've got where the game crashes, because I could see me doing salvage for a long old time. And just that little bit of excitement of going on to a vessel, finding out why it's been incapacitated, what it's got in the hold, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Avi says he also found mining a bit too slow. Salvage to me should be good, because you know, you do combat, you destroy a ship, and then go back and salvage it. Yeah, absolutely. You know, even having like a contract with the PMC org where you come in behind them and you do all the sweeping up of stuff. I can't help breaking ships apart with my Perseus guns, says Edison. Absolutely. And Stoney says, maybe we'll use the handheld cutter with the Vulture. Yeah, I kind of hope you get something a little bit more powerful. Brackets, I hope that the hand cutter isn't powerful enough that I can just walk onto someone 890's jump and start cutting it apart. But yeah. Hey, Notorious. Good to see you, buddy. That's all right, man. All we've done so far is we had a quick look at the roadmap update, which added missions to the work in progress section, and it added cargo moving around to the release for 320. And we've also had a look at Inside Star Citizen from last week, the salvage and munching and stuff. So that's literally all you've missed. A little bit more chat on Star Citizen. Then we've got a little bit of Starfield we're going to have a look at. And then a new star or space-based RTS. It's dropped a few trailers. Looks really, really good. But we'll take a look in just a second. So you haven't missed much at all, my friend. How's life with you, buddy? Are you well? Yeah, absolutely. What I really like about this, and the reason I like doing exploration when I play with you guys, when I play on screen with you guys, is when you go to some of these lockers and the shipping containers, you see the shipping containers with the keypads on, and you see the big bars that keep the doors, doors in place. And I keep thinking that's there, and later on we're going to see our ability to cut through that stuff. Because the cutting mechanic for me is one of the really exciting bits. When you consider everything that you could do, you could go to a bunker and cut the power and use night vision within the bunker. You could, there are 101 different things you could do with it. And it just doesn't seem to have come out from the game yet. That's not to say it won't. Of course it will. But yeah, we just seem to not have that kind of that gameplay. And I really wish they'd make more of it, because I think that ability to look at programs and go, to look at problems and go, how am I going to get through this? Am I going to go loud and explosive? Am I going to cut my way through stuff? That sort of thing makes a really kind of engaging game. Avi says, at the same time, they don't really have much for it right now, so it might be good to give it something. Yeah, absolutely. Notorious says, all peachy, relaxing Sunday, just got hashing out some SOPs for a Wolfpack crew I'm planning on forming. In terms of, for Star Citizen? Sneak peek, ? But yeah, no, that sounds good, man. Yeah, Sunday's been good. We've been on, Stunner and Edison and myself have been in the DGP Discord, chatting away, which I will drop details and the invite for that in chat in just a moment. But you can have a look and take that invite. I'm just going to go and pop that in here now. Or I'll find it in just a second anyway, rather than me sitting here and just whilst you guys are in here with me. Cool. But yeah, so a little bit more detail for 320, which is encouraging. Still no information on 321 yet, which is a shame. But yeah. Killian, how you doing, buddy? Kelko in chat. Yeah, no, I'm all good, mate. You no problem. I'd literally just gone across to create an invite for people. So I'm going to create one that's useful for 30 days. No limit of uses. Generate a new link. Here we go. Cool. Oh, that's right. It's doing all the hiding for my stream stuff, which is nice of it. But it doesn't need to do that because I don't actually need it. But if you wanted to pop into the DGP chat, then invite is in chat for you. If you're not already a member, if you are, jump across. It's always good to see people in for chats and whatnot. Yeah, and brand new shiny chair, so I'm not squeaking all the time, which is nice. But yeah, very cool. We'll just quickly flick over it and see what Jared has to say to us right at the end of that stream, because I'm sure I've missed something absolutely vital. Let's have a look.
So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that prototyping doesn't really look like much of anything, but it's an essential step towards proving out design and performance before all the artists and other devs go in to do their thing. That it's just as important to prove out good ideas and good paths to take as it is to encourage developers to seek out another way towards success. And that it's important to continue refining not just the features and content being made, but the very way that we test those things, earlier and earlier, and under a scale of duress. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thank you for letting us share the process of game development with you, and we'll see you all here next week.
Cool. Yeah, so, I'm just clicking on all of the wrong things now. It's the mead, I tells you. But yeah, no, that's quite cool. Yeah, and unfortunately this is not the mead. This is, I've shut the window because mozzies keep tearing into me. I've got various bites and other places that you really wouldn't want to see. But if I keep leaving the window open, these mozzies keep getting in. And it turns out I'm actually allergic to them. Also, shouldn't leave that running, obviously. So yeah, let's get rid of that one. Let's go over to here. and then we're all set up, ready to go. Sorry, you couldn't see that, but I kept left YouTube running like a pro. Yeah, no, Kadian, I'm good, thank you, mate. How about yourself? What brand did I go for in the end? So this one is an Anderseat, mainly because my work has finally got things right. So I should not say that live on stream, should I? So has got the perks and benefits thing right. So what they've done is they've aligned themselves with a company that I don't know what my camera's doing. I move a tiny bit and it just freaks out. But yeah, so they've aligned us with a company where you can order something, but you don't pay for it up front. They split the cost over 24 months. It doesn't count as credit. There's no interest to be paid. So this thing is costing me about 10, 11 quid a month, and that's before tax. So it comes out of my pay, but it comes out before. So, and it took like 3 days to get delivered. So yeah, it's all good. I don't search Argentina mosquito. I'm not going to, because I've got a feeling that thing's going to have a needle like... No, we'll leave that alone. But yeah, and for those that weren't around last week, I watched after being prompted multiple times, watched the Starfield 45-minute gameplay trailer. Because I'm looking at the next 3 months and wondering how we play with the content that I do. And the reason for that, fellas, is that, as you're probably all aware, because I know a lot of you have been following Star Citizen for quite some time, probably longer than I have, these next few months are quiet on the news front because they're keeping all the really big reveals for CitizenCon, and of course, why wouldn't you? But it does mean that sometimes things are a little bit light. I'm also aware that the next patch is very much more Arena Commander than it is PTU. So, of course, whilst we're going to go and have a look at all the new stuff and hopefully get our hands on a Hull C and fly that around and all that good stuff, it's a little bit of a drought period. So I'm trying to figure out what we can do in the meantime. And I know people have talked about things like gratuitous fleet battles and the other sort of space games. Starfield, obviously, is here in the middle of September, and that won't be a problem at all to cover some of that content, and I'm looking to cover other stuff as well. Star Citizen will always be at the centre of the content for this channel. Excuse me. And that's never going to change because that's what I built up around, and that's still where my passion is. But that doesn't mean I can't look at other space game stuff, right? But yeah, so well, if they don't keep quiet, we might hear about Pyro before CitizenCon. Well, yeah, possibly. Kenyon, you got the collector's edition, did you? Very cool. If you don't mind, you don't have to tell me on here. You can always tell me on Discord. But where did you get yours? Because I'm looking at the Bethesda store and it's sold out. But I'm thinking of picking mine up from Game if I get it. I'm not sold yet, so those that are laughing, stop. I know I'm a collector's edition. WHORE. I know I am, but you know, I haven't sold myself 100% on this one yet. But we'll have a look. Cool. Well, one of the things I just wanted to have a look on quickly is there's an interview with Todd Howard, the creative director of Starfield, and with IGN. So I thought it might be quite cool to go and have a watch of this one. This is about a month old, but I thought it might be quite good to have a listen to this guy, because there's a lot of what they said in the trailer that makes me think that there are so many parallels between Star Citizen and Starfield. They talk about there not being the technology until now to do what they wanted, which sounds very much like what Star Citizen said when that launched. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Shinobi says, keeping my expectations for Starfield pretty low, but I am looking forward to BG3 in a couple of days. I promise I know what BG3 is. I'm just being stupid. Sorry. BG3. Battlestar Galactica? That's BSG, isn't it? Edison, just get it. We know you want it. Ah, Jesus. Avi says, Starfield and hopefully Arena Commander reworks will both be solid. I want Starfield to do well, but don't think it will keep quite as well without multiplayer. No, I don't think it will either. I'm hoping what it does is it does the... it does the whole Skyrim thing where the mods keep it going. Because I wouldn't say no to Warhammer 40k. Baldur's Gate 3. Demir, thank you. Yes, yeah. But, you know, there's obviously Star Wars, Star Trek, Warhammer 40,000, The Expanse. There's so many crossovers you can do with modding. It's almost endless. I'm sure someone will do a Starfield Star Citizen mod as well. I'm sure that's going to happen. So, ironically, I feel they're somewhat similar to the PlanetSide and FPS stuff. But I really don't think that the space flight stuff will be close at all. No, it's something I said after the Baldur's Gate 3. Thank you, Shinobi. It's one at Stargate as well. Good point. It's one of those things, after watching that video, I did say that the space combat in that feels very much like it was tagged on at the end, rather than being something that's been really fleshed out in its own right. It feels very arcadey. You know, the fact that you just jump around and that in those combat sequences. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're able to get out of the chair, although why you'd want to is beyond me. But maybe you can get out of the chair. Maybe you can't. Maybe you're locked in those sequences. I don't know. It would be interesting to see how that plays out. Maybe they'll say here. I don't know. But it will be good to see how that goes. But Kaden, with the if it's independent modders who aren't making money, there's nothing Games Workshop can do about it. Kaden, she said, not 40k anymore, as Games Workshop don't like that. No, but they can only stop it if they're making money from it, which obviously as modders they won't be. Or maybe GW will bring them in-house and start its own game development studio. Wouldn't that be cool? Yep. The mead being drunk this evening is brought to you courtesy of English Heritage. It's the straight up honey mead. It's not one of the flavoured ones, but it's quite nice. Happy days. Right, we are going to kill the background music. We're going to go and have a look at this interview now with Todd Howard in Starfield. So let's pop across and see what he's got to say.
Joined by my good game development friend, Todd Howard.
Good to see you again.
It is good to see you. We chatted a year ago remotely when you shared some Starfield details with me there. Things are a little different now because the game is imminent. I played it for about an hour. We just watched, we're recording this the day before, but everybody will have just seen the 45-minute Starfield Direct. There's a lot to get to, Todd. There's a lot going on with this. So I want to just kind of start at the top and we'll kind of work our way down into more nitty-gritty details. This is the first new IP you've done in a couple of decades now. It's been a little while. So totally new thing. It's the biggest exclusive for Microsoft in a long time. And it's certainly the biggest thing Microsoft's put out since they acquired Bethesda. So, pressure. Do you, in all seriousness, do you kind of feel any extra pressure compared to any of the other games you've made, or you just kind of focus on what you do? I'm just sort of curious if
any PlayStation gamers want to weigh in on the whole Xbox PlayStation exclusive and how it feels this way around. you know, I know Halo's always been Xbox exclusive and all that sort of stuff, but it does feel like that's kind of a 50-50 thing. Maybe I'm opening a can of worms I shouldn't here, but it always does feel like that's 50-50. But, you know, and if anything, it feels like PlayStation's been ahead on the exclusives, but this one seems to be leveling the playing field. I hope I can get rid of that 15 XP in the middle of the screen. I've seen it now and I can't unsee it. Yeah, no, I get that. I'm with you on that one.
The stuff that like we talk about in the gaming community is something that goes through your head or gets talked about in the office at all.
Well, clearly, you know, I'm aware of that, you know, everything you said. And
To me,
compared to our previous
100%.
games, there's always a lot of attention on what we do. We're very fortunate. But for us, we have put so much into this game. And it is, as you said, you know, our first new IP in over 25 years. It's our first major release in about 8 years.
Yeah.
So for us, we have just put so much into it that we're just doing everything we can to make the best game that we can. Hope that everybody loves it. So we feel we're on the right track, and we're really fortunate, I think, with some of those things you said to get the attention.
Yeah.
And that we know there's a lot of people out there looking forward to it, and we just view our job as, you know, hey, just do the best job we can do, put everything we can into the game, and hope everyone loves it.
Ready to lift off when you are, Captain.
Engines ready.
The frontier is fueled and ready, Captain.
So I think
Call
the
me
last time
Captain,
we
and
talked,
I'm happy.
maybe the time before, I gave you a little grief for you Babe Ruthian, you called your shot with 11-11-22 really far in advance. And I think we were having a little fun about that before the delay. So, it's good. We want a better game. We don't want, you to just make the date just for the sake of making the date. So just out of curiosity, like, how has the extra time been spent specifically with Starfield?
Well, look, it's just such a big game. And as you do these things, you do your best as it comes to release dates and projections. But given the scale of it, if one thing is off that by a percentage, that can escalate quickly to more time. And we've really spent it most of this year playing the game a ton, over and over, and making sure that it's balanced, it's as fun as possible, honing systems and interface, obviously bug fixing and all of those things, performance, and really getting it where we're really, really sure and solid on what we're putting out there for everybody.
Well, speaking of performance, Xbox gamers went through a little unpleasant surprise with the last big Bethesda exclusive not too long ago with Redfall, and that maybe not performing on console on the Series X, kind of how we'd hoped. So, I think really all we're looking for is not necessarily everything's got to be 4K 60 or 120 frames, but just kind of. Nobody likes surprises, when it comes to the game that they're going to buy, how it performs, how it feels. Now, your games have always been these just boundary push.
This, to me, and I'm just going to rant off on because my brain goes in all sorts of different directions when I'm watching this stuff. This, to me, is what's wrong with games journalism. Is he's talking more than Todd is. And he's so worried about qualifying and justifying everything he said. Just ask the questions. You don't need to cover every possible eventuality when you talk. People get the gist, right? And that's the whole reason they sit down and talk beforehand is none of my questions are going to be, so if I leave a gap, I don't mean to, but it's all about the hype, and what we want to do is generate hype with this, or he doesn't need to justify it to this length, but he's talking more than Todd is at the moment.
Envelope pushing.
Right, shut up and let the man talk.
Worlds. They've been 30 frames per second on console traditionally. So I'm going to turn it over for you for a second here. Just lay out, just so that nobody's surprised come September 6th. Sure. What are we looking at on, if I'm going to play this on
So September 6th is release, September 1st is early access, right.
What's the experience going to be, technically speaking?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I think it'll come as no surprise, given our previous games. What we go for are always these huge open worlds, fully dynamic, hyper detail, where anything can happen. And we do want to do that. It's 4K in the X, it's 1440 on the S. we do lock it at 30 because we want that fidelity. We want all that stuff. We don't want to sacrifice any of it. Fortunately, in this one, we've got it running great. It's often running way above that. Sometimes it's 60. But on the consoles, we do lock it because we prefer the consistency.
Yeah.
Right? You're not even thinking about it. And we don't ever want to sacrifice that experience that makes our games, really, really special. So feels great. We're really happy with how it feels, even in the heat of battle. And we need that headroom because, in our games, really anything can happen.
Speaking of tweaking and optimizing,
I really hope so,
there
Cadian.
were some rumors going around.
Cadian says, did he
in
just use the
software
cylinder as a
was
frag
helping you
grenade?
guys
I
out with
really hope so.
combat, with tuning combat. I'm just curious, was there any truth to that at all?
They did not help us with the well, first of all, I'd say, being in the company, knowing the folks at id Software for a long time, I'm like a huge Doom fan.
I mean, they know what they're doing. That's why I ask.
They're the
Not that
absolute
you know,
best. Doom
awesome.
Eternal is one of my favorite games. And so with Fallout 4, they did give us a few tips on how to handle combat.
Yeah.
But in Starfield, we redid the combat ourselves, and it's really feeling great. But id has helped us really more on the graphic. They've helped us on the graphics side.
Oh, nice.
So we get into motion blur. It's just how the game feels smooth. Some other things that they do in id Tech that we wanted to bring over into Creation Engine 2, and they helped us do that. And it's great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a nice neighbor to have down the street. That you
It
can
is,
go
and
knock
I
on the
love
door and ask for some milk and sugar, right?
And I'm such a fan of what they do. So being able to get an early look at what they're doing next. Not here to talk about that. But it's just.
Oh, I mean, feel free to talk about that. If you want. All right. So I'm curious. Given you mentioned it's going to be just shy of 8 years between shipping Fallout 4 and shipping Starfield, which, to my knowledge, is the longest that you've ever gone between shipping games that you've directed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we had 76 in between, but it's something that I've directed. Yes.
Yeah.
That is the one.
So, can you I'm just curious about what was your initial vision for Starfield and how that's either stayed true and borne out or evolved over the course of 8 years?
Snapping
It's a
stuff to
great
ships looks
question.
really cool.
I will say this, that the game sticks to the original vision. That took longer than I wanted. But I'd say about halfway through the project, you realize this is why nobody tries to make this game. So it's been when you do these things and you take some risks and you're really ambitious, that can be a very windy path sometimes, is how I'd say it. But it is true to the vision we had for our type of role-playing game set in space and where your mind kind of goes. And we want to, as much as possible, say yes to the player. Like, can I do this? Can I do this? Yes, 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 yes. And space is big. So the amount of content that we ended up making to have that really feel authentic to that, that did grow and grow from where we originally started.
I mean, so neither one of us is getting younger. We've both been doing our respective things for a while.
Yeah.
So, are you okay with things taking 8 years again in the future, or
Not my plan. I don't think you would ever plan for that. Sometimes that's how it ends up, so that that what you're putting on the screen is what you want. But you're right. I'm not getting younger. Sort of start,
like how many games
I probably
do you
have
left in you?
Yeah. How many games are ahead of me?
Yeah.
Versus behind me, and so that does start to enter your head.
You know what I hate about these pirates? Completely resistant to my otherwise irresistible charm.
Would you point to any other games as inspiration for Starfield along the way? I mean, not in the literal sense of, I want to do what they did, but in terms of like giving the player a feeling that, like, something that, a game you played that you really wanted to convey. Like, I mean, when you first showed me this game a while back, I mean, I certainly was reminded of Elder Scrolls and Fallout. There's the DNA is there, but the other, I would say, two non-Bethesda games that I got little vibes from were No Man's Sky and Mass Effect.
Well, clearly, those other games that are science fiction, I think you might look at and say, okay, this is science fiction, it's like that. I think to minute, obviously on the ground, it has similarities to Elder Scrolls and Fallout and the things that we've made and how it feels in your hands or some certain mechanics. But believe it or not, it's the games that put you in a world, that transport you to a place. So I think it probably also as a flow probably has more of a feeling of like a Red Dead 2, right? Like I'm living the Western fantasy.
Yeah.
And so in this, you're living this science fiction explorer fantasy, and sometimes that's being on a barren planet and nothing is going on.
Or an Old West town, like we saw that in the direct, kind
right?
of Old
Or
West inspired.
and all of that. So for me, it's games that where I feel I am rooted in the reality of this universe of the game, and everything else kind of disappears.
There was, like, I mean, as people have now seen,
Full
there was
immersion.
a lot.
That's
in
what
the-
he's talking
in the
about.
direct, in the 45 minutes that were covered. A big takeaway for me was that for everything we saw, there was just sort of these hints of constellation, and that seems to be who the main story is going to revolve around. But separate from that, or kind of, I guess, adjacent to that, it seems like there's so much to do in this game that are you going to be okay if players just don't end up really necessarily even paying much attention to the main story and just end up kind of doing their own thing out there, or are you taking kind of greater pains to make sure that people?
Before he answers that, are you okay with people not doing the main story and just doing everything else? And I know Bethesda are the game. If any studio is going to pull it off, it's Bethesda, right? Anyone that's played Skyrim or Fallout know that this is the studio to do it. But can you imagine the success of making a game where people spend tens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of hours in your game and they don't touch the main story? Like, haven't you like maxed out some game making skill somewhere? Isn't there an achievement unlocked that goes with that? That would be such an honor, I think, for game makers to get such an achievement for them to pull that off. You can spend thousands of hours in my game, hundreds of hours in my game, and never touch the main story in a single player. That would be crazy. Before he answers, let's see what he says.
Will want to stay and get through that main path before they get back out to the wild space frontier?
It's a good question. I view our job as giving people the menu.
Yeah.
Here are the things you can do, and it's a very large game. Obviously, there's a lot to it. It can be complicated at times, and we have found though that the gaming audience, in particular our fans, they want to have all those options, and I do think more than anything we've done, I really believe this, that the more you give to Starfield, the more it gives back to you.
Yes.
And that was one of our goals.
Yeah.
And so,
Calco says it's like a band's audience singing the song during the concert.
I do hope people play the main quest, and I hope people do this, but most of all, I want them ultimately to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I know you don't want to give away a lot about the main storyline, certainly, and people don't want to have that spoiled for them, but what I would be curious of, given, again, the scale and scope of this that the direct conveyed and that I barely scratched the surface of when I was playing a little while ago, of these 1,000 planets, of all this stuff you've got going on, how much of it will the main story lead you towards? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because you probably want to show as much of the diversity and as many of the cool places that your team worked really hard on over the course of the campaign, but you can't show everything. You can't lead them up to 1,000 different planets, right?
We want to keep it sort of, manageable. That's what I would say in the main quest. So we hit some high points, but not even, it's still a small fraction, like you're saying, to what's in the game. And for us, like a main quest, we want it to sort of pay off. There are people that do want to come to a game, do the main story, and feel that, okay, I've won. I can now do something else. I think that's okay, too. But we've also learned, look, we're sitting here, it's 12 years after Skyrim. We're looking at a game that has over 60 million copies, and all these people playing it, and they're still playing it. And so we have learned we need to build in from the beginning a game that has this long-term play thought of. So that hopefully people are playing Starfield a long time from now.
Well, on that note, you guys have always done post-release content. You've had like major paid, bigger expansions. You've had smaller scale stuff. I can't imagine that you'd even want to necessarily expand this game geographically moving forward, because there's already a ton there. So I know you're not here to just give away your announce your post-release plan, but conceptually, how are you thinking about it, given that this is like a giant universe rather than just a continent like in Citadel in an Elder Scrolls game?
Right, it's a great question. I mean, look, we're going to be doing a lot of add-on content for Starfield. We love doing it. Our fans love it. We will have announced sort of the first one that's going to we're going to do a story expansion pack that's going to be coming. Our plan is to do things of varying sizes, and we've done a lot of that in our previous games. So it's something that we really like doing, our fans like. So despite the size of the game, there's still things we want to add as far as features in the future and stories and things like that. So we think this is going to hopefully it's going to continue for a long time that way.
At the end of the Direct, we heard from a bunch of folks on your team about their favorite moments that they've had while playing. Can you paint me a specific picture of a memorable moment for a character that you've rolled that you've been playing in recent months, like some just memorably cool scenario?
Let's see. Just a few weeks ago, I landed on one of the early planets, and this sandstorm blew through, and I went to run away from it. And this, ships can randomly, once in a while, they can randomly land, like enemy ships can land. So I'm going through the sandstorm, the ship landed, and I get in this firefight, and I got on the ship, and while I'm shooting the guys on the surface of the planet, the ship took off into space. So now I'm in outer space on the ship, and I was just like, can that happen? Yes, that can happen. Yeah.
One of my
very
favorite
cool
moments from Oblivion, which I've told you many times is my favorite game of yours. That's the one that I have the most positive memories with. Was randomly finding a unicorn in the forest.
Yes, you can do that there.
So, are there like 50 of those kinds of things?
There's a
in
good
this
number.
Game where
There's
just
a lot.
Stuff that's not a quest, you'll just randomly happen upon this memorable special.
I don't want to spoil what they are, but yeah, of course, we love that stuff, and we have some really, really special ones in this game that I think I'm very curious to see how long after the game is out, people discover it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Skyrim and tens and tens of millions of copies of that, and the sort of historic runaway train that thing's been. I mean, you probably can't count on that level of success again necessarily. So what does success look like for you?
Before Tom gets around to answering that, help me. Have there been any space games in recent memory that have tried to do what Starfield has done, which is single player, massive universe, lots of story-driven stuff, ships, being able to board things? Is this again one of its own? Is this the single player version of what Star Citizen is trying to achieve? And the Elite and Eve and everything have tried to do before it, because it's, for me, this and No Man's Sky even are very different. Even though No Man's Sky was initially launched as a single player, this feels very, very different to me because this is story driven. No Man's Sky was about exploration and doing that without guiding light, if you want, a beacon to head towards. Which is why when you found that little alien thing and it said, do you want to try and solve this puzzle, it gave you an out. So it was almost like the main storyline was just you exploring, and the side quest was getting to Earth or figuring out what those little orbs were talking about. But yeah. Oh, okay. Seems like you said it would be the large for ship size, 160 meters. Okay, interesting. There was a video someone did looking at it because the dots on the grid correspond to size, the ship making grid, that is, where you see them all connecting it. Interesting. Okay, so there is a maximum size for this. Gotcha.
With this game?
That's a good question because with Game Pass, we're obviously going to be bringing in, you know, probably the biggest audience that we've had for a launch. And so it just makes you really fortunate to know that you can take these kind of risks with a game like this and be ambitious, but still know that it's going to get in a lot of people's hands. So, I mean, I think for us it is that, you know, people say they love the game. And I think all games go through a couple phases. Like, have this phase where the game isn't out yet. What do people think of it? Then there's like, what do they think of it the first week it comes out? But then you got to think about, what do they think after a year? What do they think after year 2? And so I hope that, you know, it sort of stands the test of time, like our other games. I don't focus on like the number of users in that way.
But I guess you can't really design for a game that will stand the test of time, right? You just have to do your best and hope that it works out.
That is very true. You do the absolute best that you can do. Again, the whole team is just, we have really poured ourselves in this one over a lot of years. And, you know, you cross your fingers, you do everything you can. There are systems you can design and say, hey, look, this system is going to work over a long-term play, over hundreds of hours, like a character system, versus, after 30, you've burned through everything. That's certainly not the case here.
Clearly not, based on what I've seen so far. The 1,000 planets number is the big one that you've been throwing out. What's the ratio of like procedurally generated stuff to the handcrafted stuff?
Well, the planets themselves, the landscapes, you know, pretty much all procedural. We kind of make these large, think kilometer-sized tiles we've generated, and those get kind of wrapped around the planet. As far as handcrafted content, more than any game we've done. I've stopped giving out numbers.
It's a good answer.
But you know, just in the dialogue, it's more than more than Skyrim and Fallout 4 combined, just in dialogue, right? So as we get into locations and art and everything, we've done more of it than we've ever done.
Wow. Is it reasonable to suggest that if Starfield is as awesome and successful as we all hope it is, that as gamers, is it reasonable to think that a Starfield 2 is 10 plus years away? Because and the reason I bring this up, not to bring it back to like, you know, how much time do we all have left, but you have always kept...
Is this going to get depressing?
No, I hope not.
Okay.
But you've always kept your team clearly on purpose as one team. Bethesda Game Studios, your team, you know, and you had been alternating.
Is it just me, or does it look like your ship gets boarded at some point? Because that looked like the room he was in before, right? Where they're all saying, "Hello, Captain. Hello, Captain."
Starfield thing in here. You've already committed to Elder Scrolls 6 is the next thing. You said it's in pre-production. And then last year when we talked, you said, yep, Fallout 5, I want to do that. That'll be next.
That was more of like a general, it will clearly be after Elder Scrolls 6 at some point.
Okay,
That's
well...
like, let me clarify that one.
All right, go ahead.
At some point in the future.
But
like Elder Scrolls 6 is the next one.
Yeah, but if Starfield's awesome and you want to do another one, and the team wants to do another one, and the company wants another one, it sounds like it's probably going to be a while.
I don't have a great answer for you there. It's an astute observation.
I mean, I'm not trying to get you to unveil the roadmap. Like, I'm just because again, you've kept your team smaller. You've to date not like grown a second team within the studio, unless you have, and that's...
Well, we have what I would call, you know, a full-size group team on 76 still.
Right.
Updating that game, it's doing great.
Don't even. Man, all I can see is one more SC2. Stop it. Stop it. You're a bad man.
So we have gotten bigger to handle all this. We work with a lot of partners on stuff. But that doesn't speed things up necessarily, right? You need a certain size. We're relatively small comparatively,
Right.
to do these things. And I think if we look at Skyrim, again, not the plan to have an Elder Scrolls 6 this far after Skyrim, but in today's day, people are playing these games for longer. So our ability, like we talked about, to support Starfield, whereas maybe in the old days you would put it out and then you'd go on to a sequel, now we can support that game for a much longer period of time, which is what our plan is. And then as we look to like an Elder Scrolls 6, that is one where like, I probably shouldn't say this, but if I do the math, I am not getting any younger. How long do people play an Elder Scrolls for? That may be the last one I do. I don't know.
The last Elder Scrolls.
The last Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know.
I mean, I do the math as a gamer, and it's like, am I even going to be playing Elder Scrolls 6 on the Series X, or am I going to be playing that on the next thing? Because it's crazy how long the games that you make they take a long time.
I wish they did. I mean, I want them to be faster, but that speed isn't the goal.
Right.
Right.
Or should it
The
be?
goal is, hey, what's the product? What's the vision? How do we do this? And how do we continue to support the ones that we currently have? Because we have millions of people playing Fallout 4, millions playing 76, Skyrim. So,
I like Todd. I like how he talks, and I like the way he looks at things. That for me, the goal isn't speed. The goal is the product, is achieving the vision. It's a shame that the people who were behind the Cyberpunk releasing when Cyberpunk 2077 released when it did, if those people followed his philosophy, I think Cyberpunk would have been 12 months later and much closer to what everyone wanted it to be. It's that hype. People looked at the obvious hype for Cyberpunk, very similar to the levels of hype about Starfield that we have right now. But they're looking at that and they were just seeing dollar signs. It's all they could see was dollar signs. And they missed the warning signs. But
it's about, hopefully have that with Starfield.
You had told me last year that you want to direct Fallout 5, like that you want that to be your game at some point down the road. But now with the Microsoft, Bethesda, Xbox Game Studios family getting a lot bigger, you did work with Obsidian years ago with New Vegas. Could any of the games that you and your team have created, any of these 3 franchises, would you make that? Would you want to work with any of them potentially on something in the future?
I mean, there's
a
I
booby
can't
trap
say
question if ever there was.
never to any of that. For us, it is what's going to get us the best product.
Yeah.
How do we stay focused? I think there's a lot of times where you can get unfocused and try to do too many things at once, and then they don't end up necessarily the way you want. And so if I look at other franchises or I look at entertainment in general, I haven't noticed like the time gap between things being a negative.
Right.
Right? They can be a negative when you think about it and you make a calendar. Yeah. Hey, when Starfield 2.
Look at Grand Theft Auto.
Exactly.
That hasn't suffered in the
or,
slightest.
The gaps between, I think Half-Life 3 will do fine. Right? So so even though in the moment, like, how do I bring that closer to reality today? Because I want to play it. Those gaps, these are still evergreen franchises that I think when they come, it's about just doing it right.
Yeah, well, that's what we as gamers want to hear too, certainly. So Starfield, I played an hour. It felt like 3 minutes. There was, and you were like hustling me along to different save files, like go look at this, go look at this. What's the character you're playing now? Because you've got the traits, you've got the background. So like, what are you maining right now?
Well, I try to do it all. Right now, I'm digging deep on spaceships. So, I mean, you could say in some respects, This is like 5 or 6 games in one, right? It's the spaceship game. It's a on-the-ground game. It's just a dialogue game. It's an outpost game. It's a crafting game. It does all of these things, and it always is tricky for us to get a good game flow, where those things don't feel like they're separate games, that they can weave in and out of them in a way that is holistically creates something, greater than the sum of its parts.
What a view! It's a feast for the eyes. Off we go to another adventure.
To help contextualize
Always was.
Starfield
Click.
For players before they get the chance to play it themselves, what's the feeling that you try to give people with Elder Scrolls? What's the feeling that you try to give people with Fallout? And what's the feeling that you try to give players with this?
I mean, that's a good question. I would say if you think about, Elder Scrolls with a fantasy world, who would you want to be and what would you want to do? We want to provide that.
Yeah.
And then Fallout, the same thing in a post-apocalyptic environment. How does that factor into the things you find? And how does crafting is very unique in Fallout when it comes to that? Or what's the vibe of the people? What are they sacrificing to stay alive? And then when you get to Starfield and science fiction, same sort of thing where if you were to open it up and you could do anything.
To think that snapshot
providing that
of Fallout 4, like this is the last game they did
Fallout when it comes to that, or
before this one. Look at the graphics on this, and then side by side that with Starfield. Like that's an 8-year jump on PC.
And then when you get to Starfield and science fiction, same sort of thing where.
Well, when you think change accelerates,
you could do anything.
what are we going to be looking at in another 4 to 8 years?
How are we providing that experience? And we love exploration, so when you get into a game like this, that's why people say, why do you have 1,000 planets? Because we'd rather give you the option to do that than say no. And so I think if people drift toward fantasy, they're going to love it. They're going to stick with Elder Scrolls. If they like post-apocalyptic, they're going to follow. They like science fiction. We hope that Starfield fills that kind of desire to play that kind of thing.
Todd Howard, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Starfield out September 6th. Series X, Series S, PC. Looking forward to playing a heck of a lot more pretty soon. Todd, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not a bad little segment. I always find that useful to kind of get into the head of the games designers that are behind it, and I like a lot of what Todd said about, like we said before, it's not about the time; it's about the vision. Games are just taking longer nowadays anyway. But what they've tried to do, the comment I found most interesting was the one where he said, they've really poured themselves into this game, and hopefully, because we all saw, was it Red Dawn or whatever, the vampire game that came out earlier on this year and just absolutely tanked. Different team, admittedly, but we obviously don't want one of those, because anything that brings that attention back and gives people the bug for star exploring games, stuff based in space, big ships, all that sort of stuff. Anything like that is going to be really kind of beneficial to just that industry as a whole. I kind of sit here finding myself going, I might just download Eve, I might download Elite again, just in the gap, just to fill that and scratch that itch beforehand. But yeah, some really, really good stuff there. So just going to catch up with chat. But we said there that there's just lots of comments about Star Citizen 2. When will Star Citizen 2 be coming out then? Lol. I was like, yeah, no, don't do that. Does it seem if it gets one, it'll be a CIG release? So I think what Avi's talking about here is if there's a Starfield sequel, will it be a CIG style release or it'll be 15 to 20 years before we get a Starfield 2? 15 to 20 years from now, possibly. Not 15 to 20 years from when they started. Yeah, possibly. I guess it depends how how long Elder Scrolls 6 takes to kick in. It could be 15 to 20 years, you're right. But it obviously wouldn't be continuous development. But yeah, very cool. The only thing that, you know, I see the excitement, and I am cautiously optimistic on the whole on the game itself, on how it's going to be, all that sort of stuff. I'm cautiously optimistic. The reason I don't get too hyped is because this is exactly what I did, exactly the way I felt back in the day when Cyberpunk came out. Is that you just, you need to be very, very careful, I think. If you look at Cyberpunk's release was a result of there being publishers and investors, which is exactly what people will say will hold Star Citizen to account. But it always carries the risk of releasing something before it's ready. It's exactly the same reason that Hello Games and No Man's Sky was forced to release early. No Man's Sky and Hello Games deserves every credit, because what they did was they recovered and they were sorted out much, much later on, in terms of they'd figured it all out, and they'd you know, they'd put the game back to where it should be sometime later. However, that mess didn't need to happen. Does anyone remember when No Man's Sky first released? They were having to put the stickers on the boxes that they were selling to say, actually, there isn't a multiplayer on this at all. Sorry, which is awful. Frankly, shouldn't be that way in the slightest. So that happened, and you could argue that a lot of that was because the investors got in the way, the dollar signs flashed up in their eyes, and they went, well, we want you to release this now. There was a lot of excitement about No Man's Sky when it released. There was a lot of excitement about Cyberpunk when it released. And we can only hope, although we're not sure, that the same isn't happening with Starfield. You know, and the thing is this is one of the things, it's easy to be a cynic like this, and this is why I don't really like cynics about Star Citizen, right? Is if you're cynical about a game like Starfield, well, if I'm cynical about it, then if it goes wrong, then I was right all along, ha ha ha. And if it goes right, then who cares? I get a great game to play, so what? You know. And it's the same thing with Star Citizen. It's so much easier to break something down than it is to build something up. And it's the same thing. You know, well, I was right all along about Star Citizen. Well, actually, if that's a great game, then, you know, everyone benefits, because everyone gets to play a great game if it's their thing. It's very much the same watching Starfield. So I'm not cynical about Starfield. I'm just cautiously optimistic. I really hope it's everything that they say it is, but people haven't got their hands on it yet. And, you know, the thing is that, you know, like in there, if I was going to be cynical, you would say, well, hang on, that guy said that he played an hour, but Todd was rushing him through. So maybe those sections aren't great, and he was rushing him through not because he wanted him to see stuff, but he was hurrying him away from areas that aren't complete. If you're going to be a skeptic, it's really easy. You're really negative about anything like that. So I don't like that whole negativity. The reason I bring it up when we chat like this is that you've got to be careful that that enthusiasm doesn't overwhelm and it becomes something greater. That's why I mentioned things like Blair Witch, is that when the Blair Witch Project, the film, came out, everyone was like, oh my god, it's the scariest film ever. And it doesn't matter if it is the scariest film ever. If you go in expecting it to be the scariest film ever, it won't be. if you go in expecting something to be the greatest game ever, it won't be. So, I think people just rein themselves in a little bit, and I think Starfield will be something quite breathtaking. And if it's not, well, that's a shame, because you can see from that dude's face is like how much he's invested, his team's invested, all that sort of stuff. But yeah. So, going to step away from Starfield for a bit because we found another game that has been released. This is an RTS, as yet unreleased. There are 2 trailers that I want to watch. We're going to watch these back to back. But these trailers are for a game called Falling Frontier. And I will pop links into chat in just a moment, so people can go and find these again afterward. But let's have a look at these and see what people think. I'm really interested because I like my RTSs anyway, but let's have a look and see what these look like. That's really cool, all the ships emerging from the gloom. Okay, we're going to go straight on to the second one, and then let's have a chat about what we think. The second one is double the length, I think. So the second one is That was called the Soul trailer, and this is the SATCOM trailer. So let's give this a go and see what we think.
Yes, it's confirmed. Fourth Fleet is engaged in operations around Jupiter.
Well, who else is there?
The Caligula and Richmond.
Okay, patch me in.
Caligula, this is Comsat Fleet, over.
This is Caligula. Roger, over.
This is Comsat Fleet. Thea holds contact with probable Martian task force in vicinity of Saturn. Coordinates 4383, Mark 231, course unknown, speed unknown, strength unknown. Caligula and Richmond are ordered to divert from rendezvous with Erebus immediately and make best speed to intercept and destroy enemy task force. Formal orders to follow, over.
This is Caligula. Roger. Time to intercept 1 hour. Out. All hands, we have been tasked with a hunter kill order. ETA 1 hour. Prepare for an emergency turn and burn.
That's not what turn and burn means, but yeah, sure. Turn and burn is helicopters turning and burning, not that, but sure. So this is in game. That's pretty. So we got the ability to slow things down. Point defense cannons, I assume. Oh, he's going to take that hit on this port side. Yeah. This one's going to take 2 hits on the starboard if he's not careful. Where are your cannons? Ooh. Oh no, that's alright. Oh, they went for his decoys. Your gunnery needs some work, my friend. Okay, that's pretty cool. CIWS, CWIS, is close-in weapon system. Yeah, selfish weapon systems that normally only defend your own ship. It's interesting to see that these are defending both. It's interesting. So are we seeing explosive blowouts or not? Oh, she's getting hammered. Well, that was always going to happen. I was literally just saying, just thinking, she needs to open the arcs for the other one. Oh. This constant chatter in the background, that's very cool. Wonder what the G rate is on the bone. Far too high, my friend. Far too high. I mean, that thing's been taking a pounding on the right, so... It doesn't seem they seem to be equally matched, right? They seem to be roughly the same size. They seem to be roughly the same design because you got 2 turrets forward, 1 after the main superstructure on both. They're firing the same amount of missiles, and yet there doesn't appear to have been anywhere near as enough damage on the first one to make it explode. I mean, maybe I'm just being unfair, right? But so where are their point defense cannons now? There's no reason they shouldn't be lighting those things up from the moment they get. So you can wishlist it now. Interesting. So, if we then go to what do we think? The first ship blocked the arcs for the Allied ships, says Notorious, and turned it into a 1v1. Bad positioning. Yeah, they, yes, very, very possibly trainer nonsense. But you'd hope there'd be some sort of check fire. I mean, can I do that in real life? Can I position my ships so badly that they end up blowing each other up? Because that's worrying if I can. I don't want to be able to do that sort of stuff. But, yeah, no. So that is from a game called Falling Frontier. Okay, and it's from a group called Stutter Fox Studios. I'm just going to grab the link for this one. So, from Stutter Fox Studios, I'm going to pop this in the chat with you guys so you can go and have a look at all of their stuff. There are more videos, there's all that sort of good stuff. But yeah, that looks pretty good. I mean, I don't know what the... I don't know what the release date on that is. I'm just going to have a quick look in the store and see what the deal is. Falling Frontier. So planned release date. All we have at the moment is 2023. But no demo. All it says at the moment is single player and Steam Cloud. I would imagine we'll find more out as we go. But yeah, you kind of hope you'd at least have multiplayer for an RTS. But other than that, very, very good looking. That bit with the ships coming out of the kind of the orbital fog was very impressive. I really like that. Yeah. Not a bad little, looking RTS. Cadian reckons it's probably a Christmas release. Yeah, I wouldn't mind betting. I haven't heard of Stutter Fox before. I'm not entirely sure what else that they've done. It says something about here about check out the entire Hooded Horse franchise on Steam. So they do games like Manor Lords, Nova Roma, Mars Tactics, Breachway, Sons of Valhalla. If any of that means anything to anyone else, they're not games that are recognisable to me. Although there is something here, they may be the same people that do Nebulous Fleet Command. I'm not sure. The first trailer said Q2 2022. Yeah. So quite a delayed game then. It's likely a small studio that's working on it. So yeah, that looks good. It's just something that I'd seen mentioned on a couple of streams. Started again looking at some of the screenshots they had and thought that it would be something pretty cool to bring out on stream and see what you guys thought as well. But yeah, that's quite a good looking little game and a pleasant distraction from from the gap that we've got, the wait that we have until CitizenCon releases. So yeah, very cool. Yeah, so Nebulous is one of their things. Yeah, cool. So, you know, Nebulous might be something that I end up picking up in the near future. If it's going to be that sort of game where you command nice fleets, it looks quite good. I think the graphical style, the first time I saw it, put me off, but apparently, from what I was reading, that's another Nebulous Fleet Command is another early access game. Maybe we can find something on that for the last little bit. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. So there's lots of bits. I'm just trying to find something that's more official. Here we go. The Protectorate update, RTS tactical game. So I'm just going to step away very quickly while we watch this. But let's have a look.
I know you've got your hands full, so I'll be brief. Things are moving a lot faster here than we expected, and the other systems are still dragging their feet. The gate blockade is established, so there's that at least. I've done my best to get you everything you asked for. Hopefully it's enough. Hopefully it's not needed. I can't imagine how hard this is for you. Almost 40 years in the fleet, and now you're fighting the same spacers you trained. I know why you're really doing it, even if you won't admit it, but regardless, your home owes you an impossible debt. None of us here know how this is going to end, but at the very least, there's one thing I am sure of. I'm glad we've got you on our side.
Of course I'm muted. Lol. Yeah. That's quite funny. Damn. Sorry, I wasn't watching chat for that entire... In fact, I was watching chat. It's just chat wasn't refreshing for me, which isn't helpful. So now I see you. Right. Yeah. I don't know where to go with this now. Yes. So basically what I was saying is we've come to the end of the stream. Did anyone have any thoughts on Starfield or Star Citizen or Fallen Frontiers that I haven't covered? Because what I have of the last comments is you're muted, 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 lol, muted. I've gone deaf. This is probably all the juicy bits. No sound. Yeah, so sorry about that. I muted it so you didn't have to hear me leave the room and then come back in and sort anything out. So yes, this is what happens when I'm on Mead. I forget things and just carry on and bugger everyone else. But yeah, and then chat lag catches up with me, and then I don't see it for a while, and hence the disconnect. I do apologise. But the good news is that is right at the end. So there. Basically, what I was saying about Nebulous is the graphic style put me off, but it looks like it's more about the gameplay than the graphics. So fine. I think that's something I could end up getting into. Yeah. Fear Fox says he's really just telling us how he feels about us. I love you all. You know that. I wouldn't be getting on here and doing this if I didn't. The stream can't be over if my bottle isn't empty. Okay. Bottle's empty. Mission accomplished. Bottle's empty. There you go. Done. Achieved it. I'm just waiting for the bit of you. Well, and your glass too. No, that's not what you said. You said bottle. So there. Yeah. Yeah, Calco says, well, I hope the games are just at least 50% good as they are advertised. Yep, 100%. But a return to some decent games would be nice. Not getting stiffed over by the gaming industry would be nice. I think we're all on the same page there. But yeah, sorry, I'm going to have to rely on another screen now for my chat because that chat's not updating, which is really quite frustrating. But there we are. That's some nice mead. Finished a bottle myself last week. But yeah, Notorious. The Heritage mead is quite nice. I'll tell you a story about the Heritage mead actually, if you want to stay around. So this is like Badgers After Hours. So this stuff, when I was in visiting Dover Coast Guard, helping deliver a couple of training courses down there at the beginning of last year. So I visited Dover Castle over the weekend and of course picked myself up a bottle of this. I was like, oh, I'll just try it. And I was in the Holiday Inn over the weekend and they had, it's in one of those Italian chain restaurants had replaced their own restaurant. So they were who was doing their room service. And I sat there and I was like, I'll just try a little bit. And of course, they've only got the highball glasses, the vertical long glasses that you get in hotel rooms. So I started using that to drink. And before I knew it, I was halfway through this. And I was like, holy moly, this is good stuff. Ordered myself some room service and then completely forgot when I went to open the door for my room service that at some point during my drinking mead, I decided that the best thing I could possibly do was drink mead in my pants. And I realised this as I opened the door to the poor girl who was delivering room service. She screamed, almost dropped the tray. I caught the tray, then almost fell backwards into the room going, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, while simultaneously kicking the door shut in her face. Which is why I said, you can't trust me on mead, because I'm yes, one of those. I'm just not a good person on mead at all. But yeah, I'm gonna retreat now to the Discord channel. So if anyone wants to hang around and have a chat after stream, then please do so. We will all be here. But it's been a pleasure chatting with you all. Thank you very much for coming in, indulging my need to talk to my webcam, and by extension to all of you guys. But it's been a pleasure. You've been watching Drinkers with Gaming Problems. Thank you very much for stopping by, and I'll see you soon.